On. Hi everyone, I am going live today. We're having a little issue with connection, so hopefully it lasts. And today, hi everyone. Hi Helen, hi Alfie. So nice to see you all. It is Wednesday and my special guest today is Malka Dubrawsky. And Malka is a modern, hold on everyone, this connection. Anyway, so I'm interviewing Malka Dubrawsky today from Austin, Texas, and she is a modern quilt designer. She's worked with Sky. She's phenomenal. Hey guys, hello. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Malka. Way back in the beginning of time of quilting, I started following her because of her ombre quilts. And so this quilt here, which stopped me in my tracks, is made of all solids. And when I started doing my ombre collection Sky, I was like, oh, this gal, maybe she can work with ombre fabrics making an ombre quilt. So I contacted her and said, can I use this quilt to put in my book? And she said, absolutely. And then we've worked on a few different projects. She's got a great style. She hand dyes. She is part of the modern movement, and I'm going to invite her on right now, and let's talk to her. So you can hear it right from her mouth, what's inspiring her today, and and then how she's worked with Sky. So I have invited her to join. So Malka, when you're out there, I send you, oh, there, you're quick.
Oh,
Hi.
hi. How are you?
I am good. So good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
You're still in Austin, right?
Yeah, I am.
Good, good. How is it in
Yeah,
Austin
yeah.
today? How's the weather?
Incredibly hot. So, my middle daughter was in LA last week for work, and she would FaceTime me every morning on her little walk or whatever and say, "Look how nice it is here." She also lives in Austin. I'm like, "Okay, I get it. I get it." So,
I know. I just did a workout. I rode my bike about 5 miles, and I have not stopped sweating. I
yeah,
mean,
but what's the temperature, Jennifer,
the
right now?
temperature is in the high 70s, low 80s.
Okay, I went running this morning at 5:30 in the morning because he needed to be not only cooler but dark because otherwise it's too hot. And it was already 77 degrees and 90% humidity. And so,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, well,
and
Texas.
that's the way it is that's the way it's going to be all summer. If I'm expecting anything else, I got a long way coming. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, because you're a runner, right? Don't you? I think I've read
hmm
that about you, that you love to run.
yeah, yeah,
Are you
I
a
do.
marathon? Are you a marathoner too, or
I've done
back in
a
the
couple
day?
marathons. I mostly do halves. And I do some trail races, where you go out to national parks or I guess state parks and race in the park. So, yeah,
Oh, fun. Wow. So
yeah,
you're long distance then mostly, or you also sprint
yeah. Uh,
long distance?
I only sprint so I can get faster and longer distances.
So you
That's
can
the only
get
reason.
done
That's
quicker.
the only reason I do any kind of speed workouts. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
yeah.
So thank you for coming on today. I have been a huge fan of yours, which you know this because every time I see you, I see some new piece you're working on. Your aesthetic is like, I love your
Oh, that's
aesthetic.
nice. Oh,
And
thank you.
you seem to be true to this aesthetic. Like I can see a piece and say, I think Malka made that, not even
Mm,
necessarily seeing your name on it. And then I look, I'm like, oh, it's a Malka Dubrawsky.
mm.
So,
Um, Yeah, I mean, I guess we all have that to some degree, where we just feel like that's who we gravitate towards being. I hope that's true. And sometimes when I look at it over the course of a several years, I see that. Sometimes when I'm working on something, I'm like, what does this have to do with the rest of my work? But then if I look back, if I could look ahead several years, I'd say, oh, I get it. Um, so. But I think about that all the time that we're like constantly like kind of changing, but not changing so much that we don't recognize ourselves anymore. So, it's kind of like this kind of thing you have to deal with pretty much throughout the time that you're creating. So,
Yes, yes, because in the end of the day, we crave change, but
hmm.
not too much that we're alienating
Right.
our own creative process.
Right. And just in general in our lives, we want change, but we don't want so much that we don't recognize ourselves or our lives anymore. But yet, so and it's just like goes on forever. And like a lot of times I'm like, well, when will you get to the end point where you're like, okay, I've gotten there, And I guess never. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So speaking of that, I'm gonna just kind of jump in and I think, well, you have an MFA, right? Aren't you a printmaker or
Oh, no,
fine art?
I have a Bachelor of Fine Art in printmaking. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, in printmaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how did you segue? And I'm sure you've written about this because I know there's a lot of articles about you. I was just looking you up on the Quilting Daily. And they have a nice review. So any of you guys who want to learn more about Malka, just Google her name and all kinds of things popped up. You've done 3 books or more?
I've done 2 books, and then I had several fabric lines with Moda, and then one with Robert Kaufman. And then, obviously like classes, online classes, all the stuff that basically all of us do to kind of, make a living at this thing. So, yeah.
And then patterns. You have a bunch of patterns that you also sell on
Yes,
your Etsy
yes.
shop, right?
Right. So yeah, I self-publish my patterns, and then also they've been published in lots of different magazines. Remember Stitch magazine,
Mhm.
and Modern Patchwork, both of which I was in numerous times and had nothing to do with either one of those closing down. I'm just going to say that right now. Um, and um, so yeah, I've done a lot of that stuff for other people's books. And I'm trying to think of anything that I've done that's like been, I mean, I've even had gotten a chance to do some really fun stuff. A while back, this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was definitely before the pandemic. I was contacted by this interior design firm who was helping these folks open up a restaurant in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which I've actually never even been to Fayetteville, Arkansas. And it was going to be a restaurant in this old church. It was called the Preacher's Son or something like that. And they wanted all these ombre dyed aprons for the servers to wear. So I probably ombre dyed, oh no, it was 100, 200 aprons. And they'd already been stitched
That's
up by somebody else, but that was kind of a fun little project to work on.
that is so cool. And were they all supposed to be the same or they're all supposed to be unique and different color story? Like how did they deal with the palette?
Oh no, they definitely just wanted it like in shades of indigo. I mean, they were very specific about that they only wanted that, but they did want it to all be hand dyed as opposed to, I don't know, they wanted to search out if they could do it with a commercial fabric. So,
Right.
um,
Okay. So did you get into hand dye then quilting or quilting and then you're like, I want hand dyes?
I actually first got into making patchwork. I didn't know anything about quilting. I'd come from the printmaking world, and I had done some drawings. When you go to art school, you do some drawing, some sculpture, some painting, and I really felt when I finished school, when I graduated, that my drawings kind of reminded me of quilts, even though I'd never made a quilt. I didn't come
Right.
from a family where we had quilts on the bed, but they had that kind of, they were definitely divided up into little squares, little patches. And I was like, I wonder if I could translate this into patchwork. And so, I bought some fabric, or I probably just thrifted it. I bought a, cheap sewing machine from some, garage sale. And oh, it was terrible. The one piece of advice I give people is do not buy a cheap sewing machine.
Don't do, right.
And I mean, you can get it inexpensively. Maybe you don't want a lot of stuff, but just buy it. But buy it new.
Buy a machine that is a good straight stitch, right? Because otherwise you can throw the whole sport away
Oh,
if you have a crappy machine and it
right.
just
It's terrible. It's miserable.
yeah.
Having really well functioning tools in general is just really important. So I started to like patch together things, and pretty quickly I was disappointed with the fabric that I could access, and decided that I wanted to learn to dye and pattern fabric myself. And there too, I mean, I didn't really know that much about it. But I had a library card, and back when you used to go to the library and check out a book, and um, so I did a little bit of play, a little bit of experimentation. A lot of the stuff that I still do to this day, all this like wax resist stuff, is basically the same stuff that I learned to do, 25, 30 years ago when I first started making fabric. I mean, I've changed up. I don't use paraffin and beeswax anymore. I use soy wax, and I do more of a direct dye process, but a lot of it is the exact same. So I started to kind of play around with some shibori techniques and some wax resist techniques, and started to make fabric that I thought I wanted to work with, and even to kind of create a surface on the fabric, so more like a whole cloth kind of idea. And originally all my quilts were meant to be, they were like art quilts. I mean, that was where I thought I would be going, I mean, I had gone to art school, and this whole idea that I would be a craft person was just like ridiculous. I mean, who would do that?
Well, and don't you love how I think the word craft is completely elevated, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I was in school, we didn't have the debate, is this craft or is this art? Because we didn't pay any attention to the fact that there was a whole craft world out there. The only thing that I knew about craft was that there was this magazine called American Craft. That was it,
Right. And the American Craft Museum in New York City.
Right. But that was actually when I finished school is when they opened up is that right? Maybe right as I was finishing school or something like that. They opened up the American Craft Museum in New York, because I remember going to visit my brother, who at the time lived in New York City, and my then husband and I were like, oh, let's go to the Museum of Modern Art. And it wasn't quite open yet. It was like, I don't know, 10 a.m. or whatever. And I said, you know what, there's this American Craft Museum. Let's go waste a little bit of time over there, and then we'll go to the MoMA. And that's where I saw these like Ed Rosbach. They were having a retrospective of Ed Rosbach's kind of weavings and stuff.
Yep.
That changed my life. I was just like, oh my God, these are amazing, and to this day, I just the way he reinterpreted what I didn't know anything about weaving. We didn't talk about that in school. Why would we waste any time on craft kind of stuff? And I was just totally blown away by those pieces.
Yeah. So do you have any samples of some of your older stuff? Like you talking about your shibori, you're talking about using the soy wax. Let's see your stuff.
Well, I wish I had that.
What are you working on now? Or let's just look into this beautiful, like I see that in the background. You're doing your linen dyes.
So what these are, let me turn this a little bit. What these are just little kind of, they're all the gradations that I either make right now for my store or want to make right now, things I'm playing around with, so I just make like 6 values, and then that allows me to kind of basically, like if I wanted to do a direct dye kind of piece, and I've started to do some kind of direct dye kind of pieces where I literally apply the dye to the fabric, but I want to be able to play with different values. I just don't, and I want to be able to have a knowledge of what to expect. Like, do I want a mid-range kind of mustard color? Do I want a really dark gray, and what kind of gray? Do I want one that's more from the black world or more from a blue world? So I try to keep this, like, it's almost like my little kind of dictionary of color values that I can then come back to if I'm working in a direct dye kind of way. And I do that on cotton and on linen, and mostly I do that for myself right now. And then I've done a lot of stuff lately with text. I've always loved graphic design. So I've done a lot of stuff lately with text and with manipulating text. And I love when things kind of look like something, but they're not. That whole kind of thing where things can be 2 different things at the same time, or an image can kind of relate 2 different ideas at the same time. That's, that's what I've been working on. And also I just released a line of hand-dyed linens that you can buy in lengths. So you order them like a half yard at a time. So if you need a yard, you order 2 units. If you need 4 yards, you order, I guess, 8 units. I had to do the math real quickly, and I was like, I'm going to do that with some cotton. I have a
saw that on your Instagram.
13 values. Yeah. Because I've been doing a lot of garment sewing myself lately. Well, actually, in all honesty, I've been garment sewing for years, but I just, I come out of the closet about that. I'm no longer hiding it. It's not, and so I wanted to offer that for folks too, because um, I was actually looking through, I recently, Jennifer, color coded my closet. And we got like new closet doors. And so of course I had to take everything out. So then when I put it back in, I decided to color code it. And as I was doing that, I realized that like 95% of the stuff that's in my closet I have made, and then of that, there's a huge subset of things that I have made out of my own hand dyed or hand patterned fabric. And I really like that idea. And I wanted to give people the opportunity to work with stuff that's like it's like amazing kind of, well, I hope amazing, I think amazing kind of artisanal kind of fabric to make a
Yes.
garment
Oh, for
with. And
sure.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then you have the leftovers, and guess what you do with the leftovers? You
You
make
make
a
quilts.
quilt. Yeah,
So zero waste, zero waste.
absolutely, absolutely.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I think, well, I also been garment sewing forever, and I kind of go in waves. And right now I'm sewing with this silk, and it's
Uh-huh.
crazy. I don't know, maybe if Colette comes by, she can bring me the piece, but it's such a fine silk crepe that I have to do
Hmm.
all the seams by hand because my
Yeah.
machine is eating it up. I've got the fine needle, I've got the fine thread, my machine's still eating it. So now I'm hand sewing. It's a total bespoke piece.
Oh, it gives you such a, I don't know, such a, I don't, it's a great feeling. So I'm going to recommend a movie here, a documentary. I don't know if anyone's seen the Dior and I think it's called, or Dior and Me. It's about the House of Dior back in 2012. They brought in this new director, and he was brought in from like a previous design house that you wouldn't think he would come from. He came from Jill Sander, which was like really minimalist clothes, and here's Dior and all their fancy super dresses. And really, okay, so the whole kind of the politics of it or all that stuff totally didn't interest me. What interested me is when they would do these scenes inside the atelier where they would show how they would like hand sew, what couture really means,
Yes.
and I mean it totally fits into this idea of slow made and mindful sewing and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm I I totally get that. So
Well, I also follow, we'll put that in, when I put in the, my little notes after we have this, it's Dior and I.
I
Yes.
think it's on Netflix. It's called either Dior and I or Dior and Me, but something like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, there's a lot of movies out now. What was the other one? There's so many good ones, and where they show the craft of stitching. And my favorite Instagram fashion house is Alexander McQueen,
Mm-hmm.
and they're constantly doing reels of beautiful, beautiful hand stitching. Here, Colette just gave me what I'm working on. Look at this stuff.
Oh wow.
It's you can see through it. It's 100% silk crepe, and I'm making you know, this is the dress from the Hillary Goodwin slip
Mm-hmm.
dress.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm sewing everything by hand. But okay, so back to kind of what you're working on. You're doing the hand dyes and linen. And
Right.
so let's talk about, because one of the fun things that I've seen a lot of folks do with Sky is they're combining hand dyes, like your hand dyes, with Sky. The
Yeah.
project that we're featuring today is your all Sky.
Is a
But
Yeah.
talk
It's
about,
but I also have it. So here it is, and then I also have it in the other version, which is done in my own brace. I think that one of the beauties of the Sky fabric is, and the way I work with it, both in this project, and then I also made a project previously, which I happen to have over here. It just happens to be here, even though it's a giant quilt. And first I had to, iron it. So it's my shelter quilt. And
oh, I
what
love your shelter quilt.
what I did with both of those pieces is that I I took the sky yardage, you know, because it goes from one value, one light value, all the way across the selvage, from selvage to a darker value. And it's not necessarily, you know, yellow to super dark yellow. It might be yellowish to purple or whatever. But
Right.
I lay it in half yard pieces so that I can see, you know, I can see the progression of the values and colors. And then both for sky and for the shelter piece, I then cut the fabric so that I was creating in the shelter piece, all the strips are the same width, you know. In sky, if you get the Hope quilt, you'll see that they're different pieces are cut different widths, but still it's like I divided up the length into 6 units, you know, 6 cuts.
Right.
And then depending on what part of the letter you're making, it's going to determine what you need in terms of cuts, you know. So
Right. Right.
but yeah, you can definitely do it with a combination of the two. I mean, the Hope quilt, both my version of the Hope quilt and the Hope quilt done in sky pretty much sticks to, oh, if you go like this, it works so much better. It pretty much sticks to the value, and you can see you've got in the H, you've got the value that goes from that yellow, that kind of super pale yellow, all the way to a deep, deep red or reddish orange
Flame.
almost.
Yeah.
But you could definitely do it if you wanted to amass, you know, as long as you kind of keep with those values, there's no reason it has to be done within a given colorway. You could take the lightest value of colorway A and then the second lightest section of colorway B, and you know, you could do it amongst multiple colorways too, you know.
I would love to see, so that Hope quilt, have you seen anyone else make your Hope quilt with any other way than how you've made it? Because I haven't
No.
seen anything yet.
Yeah, I just released the pattern. I know it was a little late getting it. It was so complicated. It was the most complicated pattern I've ever written, because not only did I write it for the sky fabrics, I also wanted to write it for the gradient values that I sell as well. So when you go through it, I think it's like a book. It's a 25-page pattern. Luckily, it's only a PDF, so you know, only computer space is taken up.
Well, that's great. I didn't realize how extensive it was, but for you to write it telling how to cut your fabrics or
yes,
my
it
sky
literally
fabrics or
says,
anything.
if you're working with a sky ombres and you want to make the P, this is what you're going to cut. If you're working with my gradient values, which means you could even amass gradient values from your own stash, this is what you're going to cut, you know.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, I can't wait to see your and your letters. You've got the HOPE.
Mm-hmm.
Are those, do you do other letters, or right now you've got 4 letters?
I guess in this style, or for this, I've done just these words, but I've spelled other words. I've spelled other words before. From the time of at least first grade, I've been able to spell other words. Yeah, I mean, I've done other kind of word quilts, and I've even done numbers. You can use these same kind of techniques, you know, to make numbers. If you look at further in my Instagram grid, you're going to see I called it Doing the Maths. It was a series of numbers, you know. It's the same idea of using these curved pieces, you know, kind of curved pieces in combination with just regular rectangles and squares to make
Right.
to make numbers as well as words. And you can make any word you can think of making. So
It's well, and I love that. I mean, I've got the lookbook right here, and I love the subtlety, because you don't know it says Hope, and then all of a sudden you say the name of the title of the quilt is Hope. It's so, and it's just beautiful. What made you think of that word, or what made you because it is just a design. It's so modern and gorgeous. And yeah, what sparked your?
So I had done a couple other like little mini quilts that said Hope with the same kind of shapes of the letters. But when I saw the shapes, and I had started to do I also have another pattern called the coil quilt, which I've also made little versions of that. And I was just like, every one of these parts of this word, or not everyone, but most of the parts of the word could be done in these, like, you know, kind of arced values. And once I realized that, then I was off to the races. You know, it's like these realizations you have, like, you know, in the middle of the night, or, you know, while you're cooking dinner.
Yes.
Yeah.
They wake you up, you can't sleep because you're excited, right?
Yeah. So
I mean, I'd love to see a whole bullseye quilt too, just all these bullseyes. I mean, you had done the shelter quilt, it was all squares,
hmm.
right? And then have you done one with all just bullseye quilt? Because that feels so modern too.
Oh yeah, no, I could see doing that, especially with the sky. You'd basically use the same, you'd basically do what you got here in the O, but
Right,
there I would definitely try. I mean, you could either do it like the shelter quilt, where what you've got in the shelter quilt is um, basically one kind of gradation working from the center out. You could do it that way, or you could do a series of different, kind of pick and choose from different colorways. So yeah.
right. Yeah, I definitely I like how you're kind of a purist when you came to working with each color, keeping it in its box. It was
Yeah.
there's something very it's this whole like you are improv and completely capable of going all over the place, but you set yourself some boundaries. And within
I
those
think it's actually really important for, I mean, for me, but I actually would give this advice to other people too. If, it's sort of like when you have like the sky's the limit, that's like too much, you've got to put some parameters in there. You've got to say, this is what I'm going to do. And I really like for things to, I mean, it's sort of like I want to kind of skirt that line between something that feels maximal, feels like a celebration of color, but also feels kind of minimal, like it's beautifully crafted and it's very simple. And I was actually talking to my running friend this morning, after I was like, it's important for your friends to also be people who sew. I was talking to her about how it's really important for things to feel to feel crafted that way, and so I think that, yeah, and to feel,
well, and then
yeah, to feel
the
creative.
zen of the process,
Yeah.
right? Like you have a block, you are repeating that block. So the joy is all the color, right? Because
Hmm.
you've mastered your construction technique, right? And now you get to kind of relish and eat all the color, right? And
Right.
enjoy it as you're making.
Yeah.
So it ends up being really peaceful and zen like versus stressful having to redesign each block or manage each section of, your canvas or your quilt or whatever.
Right. When I made the shelter quilt, I told you that when
Oops.
you had sent me a box of, I think it was 20 half yards. You'd asked me what I wanted, and I picked 20 SKUs. And I knew the minute I opened that box that what I was going to do, as stupid as it might sound, was take those pieces and divide them up into 1.5 yard strips and then put them back together. So, but it made total sense to me. So,
Yeah. Well, and it was, and the thing is, I agree. A lot of people overthink things. I overthink things. That's why your simplicity is masterful. I really find your design is masterful. I'm just a huge fan of all your work.
oh, well,
Um,
thank you.
that we can overlook the beauty in the simplicity. And okay, so speaking of simplicity, those curves, how difficult are they for people listening out there who want to make this
Okay, so
quilt and maybe never done a curve like that?
it's incredibly simple. First of all, in the pattern, I recommend getting this classic curves ruler, which is kind of see-through here. It's made by Color Girl Quilts, and it's actually, if you buy the PDF, it's literally linked in the PDF to her shop. So number one is you can get this, and the only template at that point that you have to cut out is this little A template that it's in the pattern, so
Okay.
that's the only, because it's smaller than her smallest curve, so I had to draft that myself. If you wanted paper templates, I also talk about how you can use this thing, this ruler, to make paper templates, which I did just because I
But
wanted to have both.
you prefer the template. Like because if I want to make it, I don't think I want to deal with the paper if I don't have to. Like
Well, in a way, you kind of have to make the paper template. So I want to show you, if you can see,
okay.
I've got this 1/4 inch kind of mark drawn on my 4 inch paper template. And in the pattern, I talk about how you have to lay that on the square. So your first square is just, and I can do this from memory, your first square is just 2 5/8 by 2 5/8, and it's just going to cut out this piece, okay?
Okay.
But then your next square is going to be 4.5 inches, a 4.5 inch square. So I want y'all to imagine it's a 4.5 inch square, and then you have to lay this like that so that you can cut it out. You have to lay it so that
because you got to build
and that
in
creates that arc, you know.
yes, and you got to
And
build in
then,
that seam allowance.
right, and then you're going to use your template, or you could use the ruler to cut it out so it's now a 4-inch curve, but it's composed of 2 pieces, you know.
Right.
So in a way, you kind of have to make, or you
okay,
can just
then I
print
take
it.
that back.
You don't have to make the paper templates because I've made them and they're part of the pattern, or you can choose to make them yourself. And then the other little thing I would say is, because of the nature of the way this template is, you can't, at least I couldn't seem to find a way to use a pencil to kind of just trace these things. So I use a tracing wheel. So you just use a tracing wheel on paper, and then you just cut it out around your tracing wheel. So
okay.
that's that's my Heloise helpful hint, you know.
No, well, this is why people are watching. They want it, like, because, so I'm horrible at following directions. I've never been good at it. Thank God I run my own business because, you know, I'm terrible at following directions. And so oftentimes, when I get a stack of like 16 pages of a new pattern I have never made, I've got to read it like 3 times before I dive in. And
so my recommendation is, and this is the way I make all my quilts, I never, ever cut out all the fabric ahead of time. It's not a race. I'm not looking to, you know, finish it all in an afternoon, you know, and I never cut out all the fabric. If I'm going to work on, and when I made any one of these quilts, any quilt I've ever made, I don't cut out all the fabric ahead of time, because then you're committed to those decisions. But what if I want to change my mind? I love changing my mind. So I would work on one letter at a time, and just, you know, and get that kind of squared away, and then make decisions about the next letter. And just like, and you know this because you sew garments, just like when we're willing, when we sew garments, to make a test garment, or at least like a test part of the garment, a muslin of, say, the bodice or the pants, make sure it fits, make any kind of adjustments. I don't think it's a terrible thing to do the same thing with a quilt pattern, is to say, I'm going to try this out a couple times with just some, you know, some old sheet or whatever, some throwaway fabric. And then I'm going to commit myself to my beautiful sky ombres, you know, which I ordered from wherever, you know. So I don't think there's any harm in doing that, and then you'll be really, really happy you did it, you know.
I 100% agree. Don't ever cut all your fabric. I talk about that ad nauseum. You know, cut half, make half, you know, or cut cut one block at a time. No, 100% agree. So that's kind of fun. I love it when you talk with a sewing sister, and you're like, yeah, I don't do it all either. So there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, that way, and it's not the end of the world if you don't like that first block and you're like, you know what, I made it in this color, but it doesn't really work for me. You know, it's just fabric, you know, we're not, you know, doing brain surgery here. So if you mess up on a little bit of fabric, it's okay, you know?
Yeah. So what else you want to talk about? I know we've talked for a half hour, which has been so super fun. We've talked about your Hope Quilt. We've talked about your hand dyes. Those are linen cotton, or are they 100% linen with your hand dye?
Those are 100% linen.
Nice.
I also do like a cotton muslin. It's got a really nice drape because I want people to be able to order it for garments, but also I want it to work for quilts. But I'm going to tell you that the linen also works for piecing quilts as well.
I love linen quilts.
I do dye some linen rayon, like what I'm wearing right now is a linen rayon that
stand up. Show us what you're wearing. Is this something you made?
So,
and by the way, I got to say hi to my mom. My mom just joined. Hi, Mom.
Well, okay. So if we're doing shout outs, my stepson, Sam, is on here. And so is my daughter, Rachel.
Oh, hi. Oh, that's awesome. We got all the families. Mwah. Wait, no, so you're wearing something you hand dyed. Let me see.
Yeah. So actually, and then the pockets, I'm going to go down here. Can I go down here?
And this is a linen, right?
So the pockets are made out of the same pattern as the Hope Quilt. Like you could use those instructions to make, or the coil instructions to make these patterns. Yeah, this is a linen rayon.
Okay.
blend, and it's got a little bit more weight. Maybe it's more like a 6 ounce. It's got a little more weight than the linens that I dye, which are closer to 4 ounce.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a, I mean, for here in Texas, it's a little heavy, but anywhere where they have normal weather,
Right.
it's terrific. Yeah, and this is it's by so Hey June Handmade.
Oh,
It's her. I
the
I wish I could remember the
the
past.
pattern
Yeah,
company.
yeah, yeah.
Hey June, hey June. Okay, so how are you finishing? Are you doing a flat felt seam? Are you doing a French seam? Or are you just doing?
I love French seams. French seams
Me
are
too.
so great. Yeah,
French
yeah,
seams all day long. I
yeah.
agree. And for those of you
I
who don't know what a French seam is, you sew wrong sides together with like maybe a 1/4 inch seam allowance,
right.
and then you flip the whole thing inside out, right sides together, and then you enclose those raw edges because you're seaming it again. That's what I'm doing on this dress I'm making. I'm doing
Yeah.
all French seams.
Especially if you're going to do something that's kind of see-through like that, or it's got any kind of transparency,
Right.
you could do flat felt seams that would work too, but yeah, you definitely want to do a French
Yeah,
seam on something like that.
because then the seams also become, I mean, I'm going to have a complete slip under this, but the seams also become a design element. Like, because you can see through it,
Hmm.
you can see, the seaming on the other side. So it's almost like a line work. You see the structure and the
Yeah,
pattern pieces, which is
it's
beautiful.
great. I could see using it also because you don't have. I mean, so the half the half or the 1/4 inch, and then you do like a 3/8 inch after that. You could also change those amounts so that maybe it all added up to a 1/2 inch, especially if you did like a scant 1/8 inch and then
Right.
another 3/8 inch. And then you could use it for like making like a curtain, or I mean, it's kind of a variation on that, kind of using flat felt seams for like Korean patchwork, which I don't know how to say the word, so
Yes, yes. I
I'm
was
not
thinking the
I'm
same
not
thing
going
with
to
the Korean.
destroy it.
I
Yeah,
I know I don't know how to say it either. Who out there, like,
yeah.
who can give me a phonetic spelling for the Korean patchwork? Oh, so we had someone say, Malka, they want you to point out the exact letters in your Hope quilt.
All
Will you
right.
just, because
It's
it
like a
looks backwards
GoPro.
to me.
Yeah, it is. It looks backwards to me too. So here, right here is the H, and then the O, and then down here is the P. You can see that it goes like that, and then the E right there. And then,
Yeah.
like I said, I have it in. Hold on. Maybe if I use my other arm, I'd have a little more length.
Well,
I
I'm
have it
also
in.
showing it uptown too on the
Yeah.
there's the H. Oh
Uh-huh.
yeah, show the other things.
So this one is the one that's all done
Oh,
in
so
my
that's in
kind of
your hand
gradient.
dyes.
Uh-huh. And it's on my grid too.
Oh,
So yeah, there's the O
oh, it's
there.
beautiful.
Yeah. And these are all bundles that I sell in my shop. So
So they could buy a Hope Kit bundle hand dyed from you.
right. And in the instructions it tells you exactly, because for the O you need more. You need a 1/2 yard bundle, which I sell 1/2 yard bundles. And for I think the E you might need a 1/2 yard bundle too, just because the curves take up a little bit more fabric than
Right.
the other ones, which only need fat quarter bundles.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
because we're selling the kit as well with these
Hmm.
original colors.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
and
they
then
say
but
that
it
if you were wanting it to buy from y'all's store, you wanted to buy from somewhere else, in the pattern it lists the actual sky ombre colors. I don't have like the numbers or whatever, but
right,
certainly the colors. Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, it's and I just love I put it up in this kitchen. This is
Mm-hmm.
hanging in, well, my girlfriend has a super modern house. It's
Mm-hmm.
gorgeous. And I hung this in her kitchen, and like I just love the look of it. It's as a wall hanging. And
Mm-hmm.
you didn't even quilt it that much, right? Did you
No,
stitch in the ditch, or what did you do for quilting?
pretty much, because I think that it's got, I mean, I love quilting. That's what I'm doing here. But I think that sometimes you just need to just kind of emphasize what you've got there. Again, it's that kind of balance between going too nutty but also going too quiet. I felt like something in between was good for that. But
Yeah,
I could certainly see doing more in this area if somebody that was somebody's kind of thing. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, So this is the bundle that we're selling. This is what our bundle looks like, and it says the
Mm-hmm.
Hope Quilt. You buy the pattern from Malka on your Etsy shop, and it's a PDF. It's not. There's no hard
Right. I
copy,
don't
right? You got to
know,
download.
and I'm not going to create it, like I said, unless some publishing house is planning on putting into paper. No, it's 20. If
Right.
my memory is 25 pages. So yeah, it's a PDF.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. PDF.
Plus,
That's
it's got a
fantastic. And
coloring
they get that on
page.
your.
If you, pardon me.
And it's on your Etsy site, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's on my Etsy site. Yeah.
And that's under Malka Dubrawsky, or is it StichInDye?
It's StichInDye, and there's a link in my profile to my store. It has
Okay.
link tree thing. So
On your
yeah.
link tree. Yeah. Good.
Yes.
Good.
My link tree.
So what are you doing? Are you having? We'll wrap this up. We've been talking for 40 minutes, and I'm going to visit you in Austin when it's not so hot.
Yeah.
But I love Austin. My nephew lives there now. He works for All Hands. It's a drink company. Like they do the canned drinks.
Okay.
And they're based in Austin. Four Hands or All Hands? I think it's All Hands. But so what do you got some summer plans with family, or what are you doing?
We are going to the beach, kind of early mid-July, like the second week of July, to meet some friends. And other than that, I think we're going to stay home. My middle daughter, who was on here, or hopefully is still on here, unless she's like, oh, I hear this all the time. She's getting married in October. So I am busy dyeing all the napkins for her wedding and the tablecloths. And then she also has this like table runner thing that she wants. So I'm doing a lot of dye work for my kid, but I'm very excited about that. I too am going to be making at least one special kind of dress for this wedding.
Congratulations.
So I'm busy getting ready for my kids' wedding. So I'm super excited. They only live like 2 miles up the road, and
Is this the first wedding of your children? How many children do you have?
Honey, this is the last wedding of my children.
Oh, so this is not your first rodeo. Okay, how many kids do you have?
I have 3.
Okay.
My eldest is in the Navy. She's a lawyer for the Navy, and she's actually moving. And so this might affect our future travel plans. She's moving from Guam, which don't worry if you have no idea where it is, because nobody does. She's moving from Guam, or they're moving her from Guam to Hawaii. So we are going to sacrifice a vacation and go visit my kid in Hawaii.
She's on the Big Island then, right? Isn't she'll be on the Big Island?
Yes, at Pearl Harbor. Yeah.
Wow. Really cool.
And then
what
my son just got married in March. So yeah. So I'm done. I'm done marrying up.
Any grandbabies? Any grandbabies?
No, I do not have any grandbabies yet, Rachel.
Name dropping there, aren't you, Mama?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm making this because my niece is getting married on July 2nd, and we're all going back east to Newport, Rhode Island. It's going to be really
people based in Newport, Rhode Island.
They sure do.
Yeah.
So they sure do. Well, anyway, so good to talk to you, and I'm not sure if there's any questions. If anyone, I think I answered the ones that were kind of floating along. We may have missed a couple, but ask in the DMs below or the messaging below if you have any questions for Malka. And thank you so much for your time. I love working with you, and thank you for putting a pattern out, because I know people are going to want to make it, and they will. And just hashtag Hope Quilt, right?
Yep, Hope Quilt. Yep.
Yeah, HOPEQUILT, Hope Quilt.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I really recommend that at least one of your versions should be in these sky fabrics, because it looks so great. So, and there's so many different colorways to choose from. You don't have to choose the ones that I chose. There's so many different options. So definitely, I would do it. So it's a good summer project.
Yes, and not too big. It's not too big.
No, and then you know, you make one. It comes out to be about 32 by 32. This would make a great baby quilt for a friend, or a quilt that kind of a housewarming gift also for a
Yep,
friend. What else? I mean, it's a wonderful sentiment, you know, to wish
it
anybody
is.
at any stage of life, you know. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. It's a beautiful word, and we all need more of it.
Oh, definitely. So yeah.
Uh, Thank you so much, Malka. So good to
All
see
right.
you.
It's good
We'll
seeing
talk to
you
you
too,
soon.
Jennifer.
Okay.
All right. Take
All
care.
right.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.